God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Amen.
So the prophet Isaiah announced in God's name, "For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people." That's one of the taglines for St. A's, I think. A house of prayer for all people, the Episcopal Center at URI. You all heard that before?
Yeah.
Okay. And it's a fitting thing to begin with, I think, this morning, to remind us of ourselves of that. Not only that there's this openness, which we heard in the gospel, the beginning, even though Jesus sounds very restrictive, that the openness of God's blessing for all people, even though it's spoken of in terms of scraps falling from a master's table, it really is that Jesus' ministry opened up God's blessing for the whole world, rather than for a restricted group. You know, before Jesus' ministry, it was thought that God had a chosen people, a select people, and it was and they were known by how they behaved and how they guided themselves. And as we heard in the gospel today, a lot of what got broken down were all these restrictive rules that identified who God's people were. You know, because they did such and so with their eating and did such and so with all of their different, laws, all the many laws that have been generated. And Jesus is very clear to say it isn't that sort of thing in terms of guiding what happens in terms of how you eat that creates purity, but it's the purity of the heart. And for the purity of our hearts, we need a house of prayer. We need some place in which to be, in which God is refining our hearts, and that we find ourselves being drawn into such a relationship with God that our intentions are pure and our words are pure. And none of us have accomplished that, I think. None of us have realized that, I think. But a house of prayer helps us to be with life in a way in which things might be purified, in which things might be whole. And we need that. We need that particularly this week as we've suffered losses among us, and as we join now as a house of prayer for Anne and for Bob and for Lucy, who's not with us except in spirit, as they mourn deep losses that reverberate among all of us, because these are people who we care for and who are part of our hearts. And so we need a house of prayer where God can work in our hearts and help us to live into these losses and how they've affected the fabric of our community and how they've affected us each individually. Among us right now is Yakuro is carrying a loss that's been sort of incremental, and over time he's helped me to know of this loss. His pastor, when he and Hiruko are away in the winter, they're in another church. And their pastor, Howard Maltby, has been suffering with cancer for some time. But the cancer has actually overtaken him very quickly. And he has been writing as this journey has unfolded for him. And as a pastor, he's been sharing with his community what it is for him to go through all of the treatments and what it means in terms of the impact upon his heart and life to have this unfolding for him. And I wanted to share with you something that he had written as he's now about to enter hospice care. This is the most difficult message I've ever sent. I had no idea, this he's written to his whole congregation. I had no idea the part I played in so many lives. It stinks that it took these circumstances to bring out this information. Likewise, my reserved nature restrained me from expressing the level of love and overall regard in which I hold you. Well, it's true. I love you all and think you're great. I'm not going to guide how and for what I think you should pray for in regards to me. I know there are many different manners used in praying for me. Please don't change. What is in good order is my spiritual life. I know nothing but comfort and joy in my spiritual life. The pain has not overtaken my relationship with God, because it is God who brings relief. I trust that it will be God carrying me through to the end. I pray that God will be with you through whatever process you need to find peace as my journey ends. This from a pastor to his congregation, as he has helped them to share in his journey, but also share in the great comfort that he has known in the midst of all of his loss, as he's lost his physical ability, as he understands that he's losing his human life. He has been with his congregation and with those that he loves, helping them to know that he knows that God is still with him and near him and holding him, and that God has been his relief. So I think that's something that we share among us as well, and that we have the opportunity to reassure one another of, is one that we do indeed love one another, and that we know that God is in the midst of us, providing the relief that we need, the comfort we need to support one another through all of these losses that we've experienced. And for each of us to be able to express, as he expressed so beautifully, I love you. I'm here for you. I'm glad that we're in community together, and that you are in my life and that I'm in yours is a great treasure. And God is working through all of those relationships of love to help, support, and sustain us through the many changes that we all endure. And so this morning we have the opportunity to gather at this table, as we do week after week, to receive the reassurance of Christ's presence in life among us, to help and support and sustain us, to feed us through all of the different changes that life brings. We are indeed a house of prayer for all people in whatever circumstances we're in. And we know through our life experience that God sustains us by being alive and present to us in our time of need. So I do pray indeed that this would be a time of comfort for you and for strengthening for you as we come together around this table, as we join together in prayer, as we'll do later this morning. And that you will know in your heart and in your life the value, the treasure of the relationships that God nurtures among us in this community, and the beauty of the life that is given among us to share.